On July 11th, 8 days after the first whispers that shook Dharamsthala, the man at the center of the storm walked into the Belthangady court. He was almost unrecognizable, his face and his head concealed under a black disguise, a cloth wrapped so tight around his face that only his eyes were visible. It wasn't vanity, it wasn't theater, it was fear. Fear that someone might see him. Fear that someone might silence him before he even got the chance to speak. Hi everyone, welcome to the final serve with Akanksha Sharma. I hope you enjoyed the first part of the series, the Dharmasthala Killing, and here I am with the second part. Please like, subscribe my channel if you haven't already before, and I would love to hear your views on this video. So please drop down below. I've also started uploading the videos on Spotify. So if you would like to listen to your podcasts and not see the visual videos, you can go ahead to my Spotify channel, which I'll link down below, and you can subscribe to that also and listen to me in Spotify. He kept his gaze low as he walked forward. The black fabric was swallowing his features and his identity. In that disguise, he wasn't a man with a name anymore. He was just a witness, a threat to someone way powerful than him. The courtroom was tense, heavy with the silence that pressed against the walls. The locals had gathered in the back, their whispers dying as soon as he took his place in front of the judge. Even the ceiling fans seemed to slow. The air was thick and unmoving. The police officers didn't watch the public gallery. They watched him as if they knew the danger could come from any direction at any second. When he finally spoke, his voice was muffled by the cloth, but every word that he spoke seemed like a thud of shovel hitting the wet soil. He told the court what he had done over years. He told them about the orders that he followed without question and about the people he buried. His testimony was steady, deliberate, and devastating. And then came the moment that ripped the air from the room. He placed a small bundle in front of the judge. It wasn't wrapped for drama, it was wrapped for what it held: human remains, bones, unearthed from the earth where they had been hidden, now resting in the open for the first time in years. The judge leaned forward, the faint scrap of wood on the tile echoing in the thick silence of the courtroom. No one gasped, no one moved, only the kind of stillness that comes when something too dark to imagine becomes impossible to deny. But this moment has been building for days. 8 days earlier, the quiet temple town of Dharmasthala was ripped open because of rumors. Police with confidential leads arrived at secluded patches of land in the early hours of the morning. The first shovels bit into the earth. The sound of metal striking the mud was almost rhythmic. Sometimes it felt hypnotic until it wasn't. The deeper they dug, the heavier the air became, as if the soil itself was resisting. The sickly damp smell rose from the pit. It wasn't just wet soil, it was rot. The kind of rot that doesn't come from the nature, but from something that has been left to decay in silence. Then a pale shape emerged from the mud, a bone. Not an animal's bone, but human. Gloves were tightened, bags were unsealed. The diggings became slower, more careful, and deliberate. Each one that was pulled out of the ground did not just carry the weight of the human remains, it also carries the weight of something way sinister that we can imagine. For the police, this wasn't just a recovery, it was the confirmation of whispers that had followed the powerful for years. Whispers that no one dared to speak loudly. And among those watching, standing just far enough to be out of sight and near enough to see, was a man standing in the black disguise. Back then, he wasn't hiding his face. Back then, he was the one digging the ground to bury the corpse, not for justice, but for disposal. Once the bone was secured, the interrogation began. The man was taken into the small interrogation room inside the Belthangady police station. The light buzzed overhead, casting shadows that crawled up against the wall. The officers leaned in, his voice calm but cutting. "Quote," he said, "we know that you didn't act alone. Tell us who ordered it." For hours, the man talked in circles, avoiding confrontation and names. He was hiding behind vague statements like, "I was told what to do. It wasn't my decision." But every time the officers laid another evidence bag on the table, his eyes shifted, his hands twitched. They showed him photographs, bones numbered and tagged, soil samples matching burial sites, forensic reports that said the remains were human and not recent. Then finally, something broke. The man lowered his gaze and whispered the first detail of this case that would crack it open. Quote, "I didn't choose the place. They did." By the time news of the courtroom hit the streets, Dharmasthala was in shock. People stood in small knots outside the tea stalls, whispering in a mix of disbelief and dread. Some swore they always knew something was wrong. Some families had too much power, too much reach. Others refused to believe it, calling it lies meant to smear the temple's town's image. But one thing everyone agreed on: the man in the black disguise would not live longer if the ones he named were still free. Even the police knew it. That's why every time he moved, his face was covered, his path was hidden, and his squads were armed. They weren't protecting him out of kindness. They were protecting him because without him, the case would collapse. As the judge sat back, the bones were still in the bundle sitting in front of him. The air in the courtroom thickened. The defense lawyer didn't object. Not yet, because there was nothing to object to. These were not rumors. These were not accusations. These were human remains. And for the first time in years, the dead of Dharamsthala had a voice. Muffled, whispered, but still speaking the same. This was the second part of the video. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll be dropping the third part soon. So, till then, take care and be safe.